Well, good afternoon, folks. The news has been dominated by Donald Trump and the hacking of the DNC and the Russian involvement in our elections, and Trump not divesting himself of his property and getting ready to enrich himself. And obviously, that is a super important story. But I think the story that's not getting enough publicity is what's going on internally in the United States, and in particular, North Carolina. Now, there are a lot of ways to come at this particular story, and the way that you come at this story is based on your point of view. If you are a Republican in power in North Carolina, obviously you want to stay in power, and you will do whatever it takes in order to do it. That's obvious and made perfectly clear by what's going on, or what has gone on, in North Carolina within the last couple of days. If you are one of those people that feel that the Republicans are riding all over you, then obviously you have a different point of view. And you are incensed about what has gone on in the last couple of days. Now, if you're not aware of it, former Governor McCrory lost in the race to retain his seat as governor of North Carolina. And he lost by a little more than 10,000 votes based on the last count, recount, etc. He fought this tooth and nail. He threatened to sue the election board, which he appointed. This guy went the whole 9 yards as far as trying to muddy the waters. And potentially, North Carolina has a law that the election could have been thrown into the North Carolina legislature. And we all know how that would have gone, since they have supermajorities in both houses. That apparently was a bridge too far, okay, just based on the counts. There would have been lawsuits everywhere regarding that one. So they chose to allow McCrory to raise money based on the recount issue, knew that they had a losing hand, and decided to take the money and to use it for other GOP agendas. But they had a backup plan. Again, in case you're not aware of it, the Supreme Court was formerly a 4-3 majority for the Republicans. But during this past election, a Democrat beat a Republican in the statewide run for office. So that swung the North Carolina Supreme Court to a 4-3 majority for the Democrats. Well, the legislature decided that they had to do something about that. So what they potentially had planned to do was to vote in 2 additional Supreme Court justices, which the governor would have nominated, and obviously they would have passed through. That's the current governor. And that would have swung the majority back over to the Republicans. But that apparently was a bridge too far, and they pretty much figured, since they've been losing in court left and right, that that one would have got kicked out as well. So what they decided to do was to make a power grab. They decided that they were going to strip the governor's office of a lot of its powers, i.e. the power to control the election boards throughout the state, which previously the governor had the authority to appoint 2 people of the 3 people local election board, the 3rd person chosen by the minority party. And then on the state board, there were 7, and he had the power to choose 4, with 3 being chosen by the minority party. Well, they decided to get around that one by merging it with a different, I believe it's an ethics board, that the governor appoints all of the people, all 4. So in effect, what they were going to do was to negate the power of the local election boards, so that things like early voting, Sunday voting, things like that would have been deadlocked, so no changes could have been made. They also were going to knock down the governor's ability to appoint regents to the state university, places like the University of North Carolina, etc. They were going to strip that power away from him. They also were going to reduce the number of hires that the governor makes from the current 1,500 down to 300. And possibly not finally, because I haven't looked at all the laws, they were going to force the governor in any of his appointments to have to go through confirmation hearings with the state legislature, which was always on the books. Okay, as interest of full disclosure, it was always on the books, but they never made a practice of doing it. The Republicans are so brazen that they specifically are saying, yeah, we're going to do this, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So smile, grin, and be happy. Now, the person that's leading this is Dallas Woodhouse. He's the head of the North Carolina Republican Party. This guy is unapologetic and doesn't even attempt to hide what he's doing. Now, I'm going to play the interview that Joy Reid does with him, and this guy is a prime example of what it is to be, I don't want to say racist, I will say an asshole, okay? And he's unapologetic about it. And to be honest with you, we need a few more Democrats out there in positions of authority, especially when they get into positions of authority, that demonstrate the same lack of compassion that this guy does, because he absolutely doesn't give a crap. All right, here's the interview, and I'm going to clip a few of these things together. This first portion is just basically going to show you exactly what he's going to, what he has done, and then I'm going to clip in some commentary, and in particular, I want to put in a clip from Reverend Barber as to what he's planning on doing.
Carolina NAACP announced on our show that they're planning to sue over the Republican-led General Assembly moving to strip power from incoming Governor Roy Cooper. Outgoing Republican Governor Pat McCrory signed a bill on Friday that strips authority from the state's Democratic governor-elect by merging the state's elections and ethics boards. Another bill sent to McCrory's desk would limit the incoming governor's power to name his own cabinet and dramatically reduce the number of state employees that serve at the pleasure of the governor from 1,500 to 425. The brazen moves, which came during a special session that was supposed to be about helping victims of natural disasters, were met with hundreds of protesters blasting what they call a power grab by Republican lawmakers. Newly elected Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is threatening legal action of his own against the state's Republicans as they try to strip him of power before he's even sworn into office. Joining me now from Raleigh is Democratic leader of the North Carolina House of Representatives, Larry Hall, and Dallas Woodhouse, executive director of the North Carolina Republican Party. Thank you both for joining me. And Dallas Woodhouse, I want to start with you. How do you justify, with the governor having been specifically rejected by the public, by the voters of North Carolina, stripping him of power and using a legislative special session that was supposed to be about disaster relief to do it?
Well, let me just say, in that special session, we did answer disaster relief. We passed millions and millions of dollars in flood relief and relief from the wildfires due to good budget management by the Republicans. I justify this because this is what we've done in North Carolina. Every time there has been a partisan change in power with sharply divided government between both the branches and the parties. And I hate that Mr. Barber, who's supposed to be a reverend, likes to call people liars, but Jim Hunt's Democrats did this to us in 77, 85. Even Roy Cooper in 2000 instituted a court packing scheme once we overtook the Court of Appeals.
Now, see, this is the kind of language that pisses me off and makes me think that this guy, if he's not in the Klan, he's an honorary Klan member, okay? But all that being said, he said that the Reverend Barber is supposed to be a reverend. There is no doubt whatsoever that the Reverend Barber is a pastor and a reverend of his church. But this guy just denigrated his position as far as being a reverend. There was no need for that bullshit, okay?
These are the things that happen when we have sharply divided government in a government that loathes executive power. When we started this state, it was the legislature that elected the governor and redefined his duties all the time. We elect a statewide council of state with an insurance commissioner and treasurer and public instruction. Races we won this year for the first time virtually ever. Because we diffuse power from the executive. The legislature has done this throughout its history, and it is true that when you have your own guy in the governor's mansion, you tend to give him a little more executive power and then pull it back on the next guy. It has happened time and time again throughout the legitimate constitutional checks and balances of power.
All right, now this is what he calls a little more power. Okay, prior to McCrory getting in, the governor had the ability to place into positions 400 plus state employees. Once McCrory got in, and McCrory, by the way, ran as a moderate Republican, not the far-right Republican that he turned into, okay? Just so that you know, he ran as a moderate Republican. They increased the number of direct hire employees by the governor's office from the 450 that the previous Democratic governor had up to 1,500. So if that's what you call a little bit more power, I got a bridge in San Francisco that I need to sell you. So this guy's full of crap. There were other powers that the state legislature increased as far as this particular governor was concerned. So right there, he just lied as far as saying increase the governor's power by a little bit. But what these guys did, and he just told you that when the other guy is in office, they took it upon themselves to try to denude that particular governor and his ability to get things done. Now, let's go on.
In fact, it has not happened time and time again because up until 2010, the Democrats controlled the state of North Carolina for decades. And by the way, Jim Hunt, hold on, you cited Jim Hunt. You cited Jim Hunt.
They stripped power of Governor Holtzhauer in 72.
Hello.
They had to no, ma'am, I'm going to answer your question. You're just factually
I didn't ask you a question.
But you were saying that they haven't done it. We did elect governors. They stripped the Republican lieutenant governor of all their power in '88. They stripped the hiring authority of Republican Governor Jim Martin in '84, and they instituted court packing scheme in 2000. That was done by Governor-elect Roy Cooper. He was in the legislature at the time, and then he defended it as Attorney General. So there's a history here.
You just cited, hold on a second, now I'm going to talk. You just cited Jim Hunt and Jim Martin, both former governors of North Carolina, both of whom oppose what you did, both of whom said that your legislature went too far. Jim Martin is a Republican, and he said that he believes what you all did went too far. So he's not even supporting you, and you're citing him. I want to give you
correct. I agree that he said that, but it is also true that his power was stripped by Democrats.
The lieutenant governor.
Cannot say this is unprecedented.
He was the lieutenant, not his power. That is actually factually incorrect. It was not his power. There was a vote to strip the lieutenant governor of some power, but Jim Martin disagrees with you. Jim Martin disagrees with you. Let's go to State Representative Larry Hall on this for your response.
Well, good morning, Joy, and good morning to your audience. It is important that people understand what's happening in North Carolina, and certainly the question of what happened in a special session where people were not given the constitutional notice. Neither they nor their representatives were given the constitutional notice that there would even be this special session. And as we go back and talk about what...
Excuse me, one voice. Let's let Larry Hall have a chance. You had a long time.
As we go back and talk about what happened when Governor McCrory was elected, Governor McCrory was elected, the Republicans gave him additional appointment powers, and so we know what they did when he was elected. So to say that they would not have done the same thing had he won re-election, he would have retained those powers. Now they make an argument that they should pull back because it's for the good of the government. Clearly it's not. They call this special session where only Republican members, this fourth special session, only Republican members even knew about it. They did not give us an opportunity, and we really didn't deal with any issues in this fourth special session that could not have been dealt with last session or in January a few weeks from now. And so it wasn't just a smokescreen to take away.
Excuse me, no one can hear you if you're both talking.
To just take away the rights of the people to know what is going on and be properly represented. So the fourth special session, not the special session regarding disaster, the fourth special session, which dealt with other items, was certainly one just to strip power. And I would note this is really...
Hold on a second. You know, Dallas Woodhouse, you need to let him finish talking. Sorry, but you need to let him finish talking. Okay, everybody stop.
That has a situation with the Board of Elections that they cannot function and they cannot ensure that the citizens' rights regarding these elections are taken care of. So this is a setup to make government ineffective, and especially to make the executive branch ineffective by delaying confirmation of executive branch appointees. So they're really importing a Washington gridlock to North Carolina to frustrate the will of the people.
It's just funny to hear Mr. Hall criticize.
Okay, one second. We're going to try to get Larry Hall's IFP where I don't think he can hear me. I don't think that Larry Hall could actually hear me. So we want to make sure that both of you guys can talk one at a time. That way everyone can hear what you're saying. Let's just not talk over one another. Dallas Woodhouse, I want to go back to the point that you now have the NAACP saying that they are going to sue. The incoming governor is going to go to court. The track record of the Republican Party that has used its power in the past to do things like defund Planned Parenthood, make it much harder for African Americans to vote, draw districts that were overturned. Okay, let me read you the 13 cases that were overturned, the 13 laws that were overturned by the state Supreme Court. Very quickly.
Now, one thing, she should have said the state Supreme Court and the federal lower courts, Court of Appeals.
2011 bill, which stripped Planned Parenthood of state funding. You had a midnight veto override in 2012 to take away North Carolina's educators' ability to charge dues for payroll deductions. You had a 2011 bill that went after abortion providers, making them show an ultrasound. You had an amendment to the state constitution banning gay marriage. You had a sweeping rewrite of state election laws that a federal appeals court found much of it to be unconstitutional because it made it almost with strategic precision more difficult for African Americans to vote. So your track record in court, whether it's federal courts or your state Supreme Court, isn't good. So do you think that these bills will survive the Supreme Court, even though you guys have made it more difficult for them to even get to the Supreme Court?
Well, a couple.
Now, I forgot about that one. On the Supreme Court, possibly I didn't, but let me just repeat it. They stripped power from the Supreme Court and placed it down in a lower state court. So, in effect, they made a lower state court, which the Republicans control, more powerful than their own Supreme Court, and they made it more difficult to get to that lower court and then in turn be able to go up to the Supreme Court. Just a bit of additional information.
Things there. A number of those cases you mentioned, like our voting and other things, those we've not had final determination on that. Also, the district cases.
Yeah, they have had final determinations on those redistricting cases, and that's why they were ordered to hold special elections next year, and they have to redraw more power to white people and take power away from the black people in the state of North Carolina.
I think actually, yes, you guys were ordered to do redistricting. There will be special elections in March because your districts that you drew, which were gerrymandered to keep Republicans in power, were overturned.
The Supreme Court has not had a rule on that, and I do not believe we'll have elections next year. I believe the Supreme Court will stop that. I'll bet a $100 donation to the Durham Rescue Mission in Mr. Hall's district that we won't have those elections because the Supreme Court's going to overturn that radical ruling.
Well, why is it that it seems that most of what has been done by the legislature, whether it was denying the Medicaid expansion, making it more difficult for African Americans to vote, the Republicans seem to use their power in North Carolina. That is what was it was strategic, surgical precision is what the federal court found, that your party targeted African American voters to make it harder for them to vote. That is the ruling
a radical
of the federal
leftist judge, and he lies. It's just not true.
Really? So you did not attempt to. You guys didn't brag about. Hold on, Dallas. You guys did not brag about how few African Americans were able to early vote. This is an article from Mother Jones in which North Carolina put out a press release saying that African American early voting is down 8.5% from this time in 2012. That was your party bragging about it being more difficult for African Americans to vote. You, sir, put out a memo in which you told state elections boards that Republicans can and should make party line changes to early voting. That too makes it harder for African Americans to vote.
Is there ever going to be a question?
The question is, why have Republicans seemed to use their power in North Carolina to make it harder for African Americans to vote, harder for people to get Medicaid, harder for poor people, harder for people to get their minimum wages raised?
Well, let me answer you one thing.
He's not going to answer. He's going to deflect.
A memo that pointed out that the Obama coalition was crumbling in North Carolina, that despite a surge in early voting, a huge increase in early voting. And by the way, Republicans passed more early voting sites than ever before, more early voting hours than ever before, and we had more early voters. They just had...
That is an absolute lie. He just absolutely lied. Okay, when the early voting period opened up, okay, in North Carolina, before it even started, this ruling by the state Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, told them that they better restore early voting, they better restore Sunday voting, they better restore a bunch of stuff, and that's what she was referring to when when the ruling said that with surgical precision they were attacking the African American voters. Okay, so what happened? The very first week of early voting, okay, this guy had issued a memo out to the various election boards, local election boards throughout the state of North Carolina, okay, telling them that they needed to make changes along party lines, i.e. to attempt to ignore the ruling by the Court of Appeals that told them that they needed to reinstate this stuff. The court also had told them that they better not come back in there and not have acquiesced to the ruling of the court. Okay, so during the first week they didn't. The NAACP went back up into the court going after these guys, and magically all but 3 particular election districts put back in Sunday voting. They added a bunch of additional spots, okay, polling places, but in 3 particular ones, principally in the Raleigh-Durham area, they still continued to fight, and they did not reinstate the Sunday voting, and they did not increase, I take that back, they only made small increases in the number of polling places. So this guy is full of shit.
but not to like Hillary Clinton and other
Or
Democrats.
McCrory, apparently.
Or
Or Governor McCrory, apparently.
Are you ever going to let me finish, Joe?
Well, you're talking quite a bit in this segment.
And so here's the thing, ma'am.
I'm filibustering on my own show. That's, you know.
I understand, but if you're going to bring me on, you ought to let me talk. The bottom line is...
Well, Joy,
on that subject,
Hold on,
we
Mr.
have
Hall.
divided government. We have divided government, and Mr. Cooper did win an election. He still gets to be the governor. He gets to move into the mansion, and he can sign Republican bills that come his way, or he can be overridden with a veto. But we have a constitutional system. They did elect Mr. Cooper. He's going to be governor, but they also elected a Republican supermajority in a state whose history...
Yeah, but the reason they elected a Republican supermajority is because of the gerrymandering. And these people know that they are going to be kicked out of office after they properly redraw the districting lines and they have the new election. That is the only way that these guys received a supermajority in both the House and the Senate of North Carolina. So these guys are rushing to try to do everything they can to try to affect the new election that's going to take place.
Going back to King George, loathes executive power. And every time there has been executive power changes with divided government and divided parties, we've seen executive power scaled back. And that's what's happened here, and nothing different than the past.
Well, now we're going to let someone else talk. Let's let State Representative Larry Hall talk. You just heard Dallas Woodhouse essentially sort of deride the next governor, saying, well, he'll get to move into the mansion, and that's what the governorship means now. What does that say to you, sir? You know, there's a substantial African-American population in the state of North Carolina. They did vote for the next governor. Mr. Woodhouse has just said, well, he'll get to live in the mansion. That should be enough.
Well, we see this continued pattern among our current state Republican leadership to say, let's nullify the vote now that the vote has been taken. Let's challenge the vote even though it was supervised by Republican state boards of elections, even with terrible directions from Dallas to tell them to make it more difficult for citizens to vote. We see they tried to pass the monster voting law to keep North Carolinians from voting, and so we see at every stage they have done what they can to keep North Carolinians from being able to vote, to keep from respecting their vote, and then to keep from honoring the commitment they should have when they take their oath of office. So as we go forward, we see they ask for the recount. They're unhappy with the state boards of elections that they appointed and the members in the counties, and so now they want to change the board of elections even so that it can never act. They basically created a state board of elections that has the same number of Democrats and Republicans appointed, but the ultimate effect is to have a supermajority required for them to meet, a supermajority for them to take a position on an issue, and it just turns our election system into a shambles. Ultimately, they want to make sure the citizens lose confidence in their government. They want them to lose confidence in the executive so they can minimize what the executive is supposed to do for the people of North Carolina. Well, so it's pretty much the ALEC playbook, and we've seen it before.
Well, we do understand that, well, we are out of time, but I do understand that there are 107 Republicans seats out of 170. 30 of those were challenged in federal court. So I think we will see special elections next year. Hopefully the Republican Party will abide by the results.
But I put a $100 bet on it to Larry Hall's Durham Rescue Mission.
Excellent.
So I put my money where my mouth is.
Excellent. Thank you, State Representative Larry Hall, and also to Dallas Woodhouse. Coming up.
Dallas Woodhouse, bad cracker. Now here's Reverend Barber's basic response, and I'm splicing this stuff in so that you can see exactly what's going on here. Now here are the people that were protesting when they got wind of what was going down with the North Carolina legislature.
Didn't defend my country. For somebody to tell us we can't exercise our constitutional rights. So when I knock on this door today, I knock on this door for freedom. I knock on this door for democracy. I knock on this door for North Carolina.
Welcome back to AM Joy. Dozens of protesters, including the veteran you just saw, were arrested on Friday in the North Carolina General Assembly, where hundreds gathered to oppose what they're calling a power grab by GOP lawmakers. In an extraordinary move, outgoing Republican Governor Pat McCrory signed a bill stripping the incoming Democratic governor of some key powers. The bill substantially limits Governor-elect Roy Cooper's authority to make appointments to the State Board of Elections and reduces Democrats' power over elections boards, which determine things like how many voting sites each precinct will get. In what is nothing short of a legislative coup, the state's Republican-controlled General Assembly took advantage of an impromptu special session that was supposed to be about disaster relief to file bills aimed at weakening Cooper's authority after spending weeks contesting Cooper's narrow victory. McCrory finally conceded on December 5th, but with the backing of state Republicans, is fighting to ensure that if he can't run North Carolina, neither will his successor. And joining me now from Raleigh is Reverend William Barber, president of the North Carolina NAACP and the leader of the Moral Mondays movement. Reverend Barber, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been a long night. You know, more than nearly 100 people have actually gotten arrested. That young man was one of them. He was a former warrior in Afghanistan, and we were locked out of the gallery. People simply wanted to go in and watch, and in a form of almost fascism, they locked the building, didn't want to let people speak up, and we literally knocked on the doors to try to get in, and they arrested people for doing that.
And as we know that as of 11:30 last night, about 45 of those protesters had been released, and we'll just await updates on the status of the people that were arrested. Reverend Barber, I want to play for you Representative Nelson Dollar. He is a Republican state representative who was defending the passage of these bills, stripping the incoming governor of his powers. Let's take a listen.
This is majority rule. We have elections. Elections have consequences. Elections provided us a new governor. But those same elections, that same electorate, provided supermajorities the same as in this current session.
You can hear people chanting, protesters chanting in the background. How do you respond to that, Reverend Barber?
Well, you know, it sounds a lot like segregationist talk when they used to have, say they had the majority, but a majority does not give you the right to run roughshod over the Constitution. These Republican extremists have a special kind of low and a thirst for power to lie the way they do. So let me clear up the record. First of all, this legislature is unconstitutionally constituted. The courts have ruled that they only have a supermajority because of racist gerrymandering, which now the courts have demanded have to be withdrawn, and we have to have a special election next year. And number two, 13 times this legislature has passed unconstitutional laws that the courts have overturned. That's why we in the moral movement fight them, because they have a propensity to do this. Nextly, this was a Harrod session, not a special session for hurricane victims. It was about power grabbing. It was done in secret. There was no notice. There were all white people in the secret meetings that planned this. They claimed that Cooper only won by 10,000 votes, but they don't talk about the 158 sites that they denied in early voting versus what we had in 2014. And this is unprecedented. Democrats have never done this, even though they lie and say that they have. We are planning to sue. I want to announce that on your program, because we believe these are violations of the Voting Rights Act as well as the Equal Protection Clause, because millions of voters voted for Cooper, millions of African Americans, and by stripping of the power, they are diluting the influence of African Americans. And this is just, I mean, it's almost, you have how to respond to these kind of distortion. They're really mad because Cooper won, and also an African-American, Mike Morgan, won the Supreme Court by over 350,000 votes and 76 counties. That's what's really going on here, and we're going to fight this with everything we have.
And one of the reasons that they, have sort of ridiculed Roy Cooper, one of our guests in the next hour, Dallas Woodhouse, has said, well, he doesn't show up much to court, but that's because Roy Cooper has refused to defend things like the SB2 law, that both regulated who goes to the bathroom where and also stopped cities from raising the minimum wage. I want to play a little bit of Governor-elect Cooper talking about this power grab on Thursday. Take a listen.
Most people might think that this is a partisan power grab, but it is really more ominous. If I believe that laws passed by the legislature hurt working families and are unconstitutional, they will see me in court.
And Reverend Barber, you have said that the NAACP plans to go to court. It sounds like Roy Cooper is going to go to court. Give us a little bit of how that is going to play out. Are these going to be one sort of joined lawsuit, or do you expect multiple suits to wind up in court? And can those actually even get to the Supreme Court? Because one of the laws they passed makes it a more circuitous route to even get a lawsuit to the state Supreme Court.
Yeah, and that's going to probably be challenged as well. There's going to probably be multiple suits because, you know, we're nonpartisan in the NAACP and the Forward Together Mall movement. But the reality is, you know, they say things, as you said, about Dallas Woodhouse, and saying that, you know, he has been constantly, his own brother calls him a racist. I very seldom respond to him. But we have to fight this. This is bad for America. This is just as bad as those racist voter suppression laws, and we beat them on those. We beat them on redistricting. That's what I want people to know. And I want people to understand that after all their tricks and all their suppression, they lost. And they see the handwriting on the wall. They know that next year, when these lines are redrawn, many of them will not get reelected. They can only get elected through trickery and through racist gerrymandering. And so we have to fight it in the civil rights community. I'm sure the parties will fight, but we have to wage this fight on behalf of the people, because what they have literally done is they have attempted to, they're scared of the policies. This is the same group, Joy, that would not allow living wages to be voted on, even though 79.6% of North Carolinians wanted to be voted on. This is the same group that kept 500,000 people from having Medicaid expansion, 346,000 white people, 30,000 veterans. This is the same group that has cut $1 billion from public education, and they took 900,000 people's earned income tax credit so they could give 14 families a tax break. This group has no integrity when it comes to caring for the people. This was a secret coup. It's unconstitutional. It's immoral, and we plan to fight it with everything we have. We cannot let it stand.
Reverend Barber, we really appreciate all that you are doing, and we will continue to follow you. Sir, Reverend William Barber, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now I'm going to play one final piece, and that's going to be from the news media, the local news media, the local print media down in North Carolina.
Being called a legislative coup, GOP lawmakers in North Carolina passed a series of laws that strip powers from the newly elected Democratic Governor Roy Cooper. This unprecedented move follows a contentious election last month where Cooper defeated incumbent Republican Pat McCrory by only 10,000 votes. Protesters were arrested this week and removed from chamber galleries as the General Assembly moved forward. Joining me now is Colin Campbell, reporter for the Raleigh News and Observer, who has been following the story very closely. Colin, thank you for joining us first of all. But to start, these new measures were pushed through the state legislature despite protests. Tell us more about the changes and the effect it will have on Cooper as he takes office.
So there are several bills that were passed this week in this very hastily called special session. Originally started as a session to deal with some disaster relief issues, suddenly became a session to deal with appointment powers of the governor and then the way the elections are structured in North Carolina. So the big ones are that Governor Cooper's cabinet is going to have to go through a Senate confirmation process, kind of like the president's cabinet appointments go through. There's also some changes to some board appointments that the governor is going to have, and then there's some major changes to the control of the elections process in the state. The governor's party typically controls the election boards throughout the state. This would change it to a bipartisan election board, which would be half and half between Republicans and Democrats, likely to deadlock on a lot of things and doesn't give the Democrats the power to increase early voting and things like that in future elections.
Well, as you just mentioned, it happened during a lame duck session. It was supposed to be about disaster relief. Tell us about how this changed and how it changed so quickly.
Yeah, so they came in the beginning of this week to deal with disaster relief. Obviously, North Carolina was hit hard by Hurricane Matthew's floods as well as some wildfires out in the western part of the state, so there was a need for funding for that. So Governor Pat McCrory called the session for that, but he left open the idea that the legislators could talk about any other topic they wanted. So they ended the disaster relief session and called a second special session to begin only 2 hours later, and they wouldn't tell, the legislative leaders wouldn't tell the press or the Democrats or anyone else what was on the agenda until after the session began. So we had to sort of parse through the bills as they were being filed to even see why the special session was occurring or what they had in mind to change during the last couple days.
So what does the incoming governor have as any kind of possibilities to handle this situation? Court, or is there nothing he can do?
Well, he's looking to the courts at this point, and Cooper at this point has vowed that he's going to look for ways in which some of these laws may be unconstitutional and sue the legislature. That's probably the most likely scenario in the short term. Longer term, we've got special elections in what will be redrawn districts in the legislature owing to some gerrymandering court decisions recently. So a number of the legislators will, assuming the Supreme Court doesn't act, be up for election in 2017 in November. That's where the Democrats would like to be able to take back a larger share of the legislature, and if they aren't able to get relief in the courts, make some changes through that approach.
Colin Campbell from the Raleigh News and Observer, thank you very much.
All right, so the best case scenario is as soon as the new governor gets into position, he immediately, along with the NAACP, and they may just do it right now, goes into federal court to argue about the unconstitutionality of the action overturning of the various laws that tended to suppress the black vote and the fact that it was targeted. That may be the best foundation that they could use. If for whatever reason they are unsuccessful, the fact that there are special elections and non-racial redistricting has to be done, okay, non-racial, and the federal court will oversee that to make sure that the lines drawn are non-racial. In 2017, I believe it's March, a special election will be held, okay? And at that point, that is when the Republicans will lose their supermajority. Now, I don't know if they're going to retain the numerical majority, but they damn sure will not have a supermajority. So that's when the fun will actually begin, because if for whatever reason, and just so that you know, North Carolina now is a majority Democrat, if the legislature is swung over to the Democrats, and it looks like there is that possibility, all of a sudden the people will receive a lot of benefits. They will be, depending on whatever Obamacare is, but one thing, the Medicare expansion, that damn sure is not going away. They're not going to take that away from the people. So the state of North Carolina will, for once, be able to receive expanded Medicare benefits. The early voting and all of the voting suppression stuff, that should basically go out the window. And there will be several other major changes that are quote unquote pro the people. Again, this story should be receiving much more national attention than it's receiving. And again, I understand the hacking stuff and the Democrats and even Republicans are jumping up and down about Russia being involved in our elections, and the fact that it wasn't just Clinton that they attacked. They actually attacked 4 potential electees that were Democrats to the House of Representatives. That's already been proven, okay? So there's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. But this story in itself needs to receive more attention, because if these elected officials, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, are successful in holding what they have just achieved, this will be a blueprint that's going to work its way throughout from North Carolina down into Georgia and across Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, etc. So I am going to definitely stay up on this particular story.